webinar. This webinar is geared to take approximately 45 minutes, as we know that your time is valuable. Once we have completed, we will open it up to a short Q&A section, so please hold your questions until then. Or if you'd rather, you can type them in on the right side of your screen. If you notice in the GoToMeeting panel, about 3/4 of the way down, there's a chat feature. You can simply write your question right in there, and we will address it right at the end. John Vrabel and Mark Stillman are the co-founders of Energy Edge, a management services firm which provides a broad range of services to both energy marketers as well as the companies that provide their products and services to the industry. They are both students of the energy industry who continually study the changing dynamics of this exciting marketplace to help position their clients for the future. Both John and Mark have broad energy industry backgrounds as well as professional expertise in areas such as finance, business product development, strategic planning, turnaround work for at-risk organizations, business funding and recapitalization, and executive management. In 2011, at the encouragement of several heating oil dealers, a separate standalone software business was launched. Today, the Energy Engine offers a proprietary turnkey e-commerce and behavioral marketing solution geared towards the heating oil and propane dealer community. Through these webinars, John and Mark hope to share some of the changes and challenges they see for our industry, stimulating meaningful dialogue concerning these changes, and sometimes even challenge the conventional thinking of the industry. Presenting today's webinar is both Mark Stillman and John Vrabel. So, Mark, you want to kick it off?
Sure will. Thank you, Adrian. As always, when folks on the phone, thank you for your time. But we have 3 presenters in Citrix, and even as good as that technology is, sometimes there's gremlins. So, Adrian, if anything goes awry on my end, please speak up and let me know. Again, good morning. What's that?
I said, sounds like a plan.
Good. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. We like to be militant about sticking to the 45-minute timeline, so I'll get right into this. Obviously, how to make it colder is going to grab some people's attention, and obviously we're playing with words here, but we will share a very interesting concept about the way the industry can overcome the challenges of warmer weather or winters that are not behaving as they may be used to and coming in patterns, which has posed a really significant challenge to our industry. Not that we need any more challenges, but we will talk about this concept of weather mitigation, and we will run through an actual math calculation that will show you how to make it colder. We gave this presentation yesterday to a nice group. I got some great feedback. A couple people said that they had learned a thing or two even after being in the industry for a really long time, but they also informed me that the beginning was a little depressing. So I will forewarn you that we are going to talk about some of the challenges and the habits of our industry. And sometimes that's, we're not meant to be clubbing people over the head or trying to be wet blankets. We're just trying to provide context for how this industry has changed very dramatically, especially in the last 10 years. And things that fuel dealers are doing in an innovative way, really changing their thinking. So, and when I talk in the beginning here about the industry and the state of affairs, although it might be stinging for all of us, I say us because I've been in this industry now for 22 years, wasn't born and raised, but I will certainly hang my hat here until I retire. I worked in the operations side. John Vrabel and I have both run very large energy companies or participated in the management teams of very large energy companies. So when we say we genuinely mean we. We're not talking from an ivory tower. So we're going to jump into this. The agenda really is very simple. We're going to talk about the gambles this industry has taken historically on a couple of key fronts. We're going to talk about hope is not a strategy. A lot of businesses, energy is not the only one, really, who has to budget hope because so much is out of the control of all of us. It's a great book, too, by the way, if anybody's really into sales and growth strategy. That's an awesome book. I'd go find it. We're going to talk about a key metric that the industry, I think, underutilizes. Some dealers are obsessed with it and it makes me happy, and other dealers, quite frankly, have never done the analysis, and it kind of makes me a little discouraged because it's extremely important. And growing gallons when it's warm, which I know sounds utterly counterintuitive, but I can assure you, and John has the data to back it up today, that we have lots and lots and lots of dealers who are already doing this. and overcoming the weather and shaking their heads a little bit in disbelief that other dealers aren't doing the same thing, but maybe secretly happy that nobody else is as of yet. So I typically like to start off my presentations in person, and I'll tell you ahead of time, I'm way better in person, not because I'm good looking, because I'm not, but I'm just better in person than I am on the web. But I'll still use some of those tricks. You know, obviously if somebody says, hey, what if you can make it colder, Mr. Fuel Dealer, and you're going to laugh in my face, but you're going to probably want to listen because you're curious as to what that means, because we always want it to be colder. And as if anybody's seen me speak to, I tend to provoke a lot of arguments because we like to challenge conventional wisdom, not to be jerks just because we're trying to get people to think. But I'm sure that people would want to talk about it, and that's what we're going to discuss today. So, second question would be, we're sitting in a room together, and I said, imagine this. Imagine the success and future of your business, your legacy, your generation. Some of you have been in business for 100 years, was completely dependent on your ability to A, predict the weather, and B, win a huge Vegas bet. Not one or the other. You had to get both done. And if you sit back in your chairs this morning and think a little bit about that, you might laugh again in my face because I'm asking the question, but it's not really funny. It's actually what we do every single day in this industry. We are gambling on our ability to predict the weather, or if nothing else, hope the weather shows up, and then winning a Vegas bet. And we'll talk about the Vegas bet because that's probably the most curious part of all this. So we have a gambling addiction as an industry, and those two huge gambles are the weather and margins. If anybody on the phone in this industry doesn't believe that we live and die by weather and margins, then you must have the best HVAC business in the entire industry, because otherwise 90+% of operating incomes in this industry are coming from fuel margins. So we're gambling every single year on the weather. So we know what we do, right? We look at our 30-year degree day norm, depending on what market you're in. We plan resources. We get a whole bunch of people lined up. We get our budgets. We polish them up. We staple them together. We put them on the desk. And then what? We sit back. We hope. We pray. We do some kind of cold weather voodoo dance, and very likely bite your nails. If anybody has been living in the Northeast in the last 10 or so years, this whole 30-year degree day norm thing is an incredible gamble. So John, as our purveyor of all data, when was the last time we had a winter that was actually aligned with a 30-year average, on degree days?
Well, I'll tell you, Mark, you think about this winter and certainly last winter as well, and it seems like it's been forever. Actually, the year before that was above average in terms of the 30-year heating degree day average. But what we see is that those average winters are coming less frequently for us. And I think the point that you make is a valid one. If we're betting on the weather, not only is it a gamble, but it's becoming a little bit longer odds as we look at the most recent data. So the ability to take control, as you're talking about in this presentation, to me makes a lot of sense.
Good. So Mother Nature is the first gamble we take, and we build budgets around Mother Nature, and we're hoping for some statistical average, which, as we know, we're 2 years in a row here, way under that. My bigger fear has always been not our ability to adjust to warmer weathers, but our ability to adjust to a string of warm winters when they start piling on top of each other. Not because I'm scared for the industry. I'm not. There will always be demand, and there will always be heating oil customers out there. The industry has stabilized in the last 5 years, certainly in terms of what happened in the early part of the 2000s. But more businesses and dealers and friends of ours, people that we have great relationship with, adjusting to the change in weather. How do we adjust to that and remain profitable? The second gamble we like to take, and we're probably more addicted to this one than we are to the weather one, is the commodity market, which I ran a hedging and trading firm and have done tons of buying and hedging in my career in this industry. It's kind of how I started. This is way worse than Vegas. I'd much rather go to Red 53 and spin the wheel than to play around in the commodity markets. But margins are directly linked to price, direction, volatility. We know this. I'm preaching the converted here. Margins are not something that you can just control. It's a myth to think that you can control margins in this industry. The market moving around is going to affect that. Your competitors are going to affect that. Demand is going to affect that. Wanting gallons, pushing for deliveries. Margins are much harder to control than dealers think, which is why there's so much huge flex in the margin profile of companies. And to overcome this addiction, we kind of bury ourselves in tons and tons of market intelligence coming out of the various people in the industry whose job it is to provide that. And we feel as though this justifies the gamble, even though most dealers, frankly, and most really smart people don't understand what those charts and things mean. We even have experts who are going to guess the market. They're going to tell you what's going to happen this season, the likely path for heating oil and propane and crude and everything else in the upcoming year. I can't tell you how many times I sat with brilliant people in this industry who said, hey, Mark, what's the market going to do this year? And if I had the answer to that question, I would not be giving this webinar. I'd be living in St. Bart's, probably eating lobster. So I think what we try to do on the commodity side is blunt the gamble, blunt our obsession with this gamble, blunt our even still shocking to me desire on the part of some retailers to take positions, buy fuel, get convinced that the price is right early in the season. We kind of soothe that with a bunch of information thinking that we're in control of it when you're absolutely not in control of it. Geopolitics and Goldman Sachs are in control of it, not you. So we are taking two enormous gambles, weather and commodity markets, as the primary foundation of how we plan our businesses. The problem with that is, in a world now where demand has come down a lot, margins are under pressure, consumers seem completely, we just can't satisfy them. They have these incredibly lofty expectations of us, almost unreasonable. Budgets are tight, costs are up. There's still a lot of competition. There's still a lot of really low-priced, rusty truck guys out there, no disrespect. These gambles have become incredibly risky because we are literally, we can't absorb it. Maybe 20 years ago, we could absorb the impact of weather and margins a little better. Even when I got into this industry in the mid-2000s, we'd change prices 4 or 5 times, maybe in an entire year. Now you're doing that in a week, maybe in 2 days. So the world has changed. These gambles have become pretty intense and have pretty intense consequences. The budgeting on hope part is really more about, if you think about your budgets, you sit back in July and August and June or whatever with your management team and your accountants, and you take into account, okay, how is ingredients going to look? How are our margins going to look? Can we grow? Are we going to lose customers? What are people doing out there? How are our current customers behaving? Are they using as much as they used to? Are they using supplemental heat? Has average gallons gone down? Has it gone up? Are we delivering the experience? Are people going to stay loyal to us? All of that goes in, whether you know it or not, although most of you probably do, into this right here are the 6 things essentially that build your P&L and your budget. But none of these things are a sure thing. Even the smartest people out there who have businesses with historical precedent are going to get tripped up by at least 3 of these on any given year. So we've taken gambles, we're budgeting on hope, and we're living in a world where all of that is becoming increasingly more risky. Holding on to customers is harder, satisfying them is harder, margins are harder. The industry has gotten pretty tough. So taking risks is no longer an option. Okay, so this is the end of the depressing part. It's also the end of the part of, yeah, Mark, I think we got that. But I'd be surprised at how many people reach out to me after these presentations and either call into question or want to talk more about some of these facts. So we're building our businesses around things we can't control. And then we're building our businesses essentially around things that we think are in our control, but really they're not. They're barely controllable. And John, listen, you've built a lot of businesses in your career, not just in energy, but outside energy. I mean, how would this look to you if this was the plan for our new energy business?
Well, I'll tell you, having built businesses my entire career, like you say, both inside energy and outside of energy. I mean, it'd be a pretty hard argument for the boss, who may be the investor, if it's internally funded, or an outside investor, to kind of look at our businesses today based upon where we are, and like you point out, budgeting on hope, relying on cold weather, relying on margins, both of which are outside of our control, and a whole lot of other things that are just barely in our control. It'd be really tough for those decision makers to say, "Yep, I'm going to invest in that business idea, John." And I think the the takeaway from that is, we're at that point in kind of the development of our industry where we just need to look a bit differently, at our industry. As as Mark said just a few minutes ago, this is kind of the end of the presentation that's depressing, because there certainly is hope. We just need to think about our business differently than we have in the past, so that we can regain that control that we had previously.
Yeah, agreed. So what are we going to do about it, right? So I think all of us know, and one of the greatest challenges of this industry, which has never really been solved, which is how do we break the inextricable link between weather and volume, and therefore profits. As the weather goes, so go gallons and profit. And if you're really good at controlling and laying people off and cutting costs and adjusting and flexing your business to a decreased demand, then maybe you can preserve some bottom line. If the margin gods show up like they did last year, and even though it's warm, the market goes progressively, predictably downhill for the entire winter as if scripted, and people say, well, I had record margins last year, and the sarcastic guy in me says, well, with that market, you better have had record margins. It was the easiest market to manage in the history of the industry. So I think that breaking the link between weather and gallons is what our company is all about. We want to help fuel dealers find a way to be, chasing it all the time when the weather doesn't show up, doing dramatic things to their business. And it can be done. We don't have to be beholden to the weather in this industry, and we'll get to that in a second. Gallons per degree day is something I latched on in 1995. It was something that was taught to me by a mentor in this industry, somebody that you all know who I won't name. And he told me that really, Mark, there's only two things that matter. And I worked for a really big MLP, publicly traded heating oil company. He said, gallons per degree day and margin, that's all I care about. Make sure that those are good and we're good. And gallon per degree day is, the most important metric in terms of normalizing your business to weather. It gives you a very good indication about your growth, your attrition, weather impacts, 1 year over the next in terms of normalizing how that business works. Yet you don't hear about it very much. There's an obsession about all the other stuff that's listed here, and certainly gains and losses and gallons per hour and profit per service call. But the one thing that's the most important doesn't get a lot of attention. I would challenge all of you who are doing it to look at it back 4, 5, 6, as long as you can with data. For those of you who are not looking at this is a fascinating number to measure across your company, not on a customer by customer basis. Look at how that flexes with the weather. and put this in your KPIs. A lot of folks are into managing their businesses more tightly using business intelligence or Excel. This should be right up there near the top of the list. I have never had a dealer I've known or consulted for or even just as a favor helped out with this particular metric that didn't thank me after as a real eye-opener. So if we're going to go back to school, this is a place to go. So, okay, how are we going to improve gallons per degree day? Because obviously the more gallons you sell per degree day, the more volume you have, the more margin you have, the more money you make. Well, here's another duh moment, which is, okay, it's cold. Okay, if it's a really cold winter, then obviously you're going to sell more gallons, and therefore your gallons per degree day will go up. But you can still sell more gallons, still improve gallons per degree day, if you learn how to sell more gallons when it's warm, which is impossible, is what everybody's thinking right now, but it's not impossible. The reason it's impossible in the collective thinking of the industry, and I'm going to preface these following comments with something very important. I encourage you to listen so nobody reaches through the phone and wants to strangle me. I am a proud, satisfied, automatic delivery, full-service customer in central New Hampshire. I and John and Adrian and the rest of our company, when we start talking about on-demand and will call as being a growing segment of the market, we are not casting aspersions on full-service automatic delivery customers. I love being one. Now, my neighbors are both retired pediatricians, and they're not. They're will call customers. They're not the typical will call customer that we think of in this industry, but they love buying their oil online and shopping around for price and using a plumber. We argue about it all the time, but we get along just fine. We are not anti-automatic, but the reason that it sounds impossible to grow when it's warm is because if you have a business built around the traditional model of full-service automatics, then yes, as the weather goes, your volume goes. I do this little game when I present live called the 1-minute P&L. If you tell me how many automatic delivery customers you are, I can do your P&L in about 45 seconds. I know by region, roughly the consumption per customer. You can figure out your margin, and you're done. That is great. And automatic delivery customers are a cornerstone of this industry. But unfortunately, they're less and less reliable, less and less loyal, and absolutely glass ceiling. You're only going to sell so much fuel if you're only in the automatic delivery business. You're going to only sell less than the maximum. Take every customer you have in most of New England and Pennsylvania and the Mid-Atlantic, multiply times 500 to 700, and that's it. That's all you're going to get out of them. Maybe if you're up here where I am, you might get 900. So our idea here is to sell more gallons per degree day when it's warm, but that requires some new thinking around the profile of your business. Full service is a very, very difficult part of this business to grow. We are friends with and respect the folks who do marketing, Rich and Warm Thoughts and Megan and Gil and Prime Media, and great respect for those people, but all of us are continually frustrated by how much harder it is to grow your full service business. If you look at the research Aura did last year, look at the cost of adding full service customers, $500 to $800. That half of them are gone in 18 months. They just don't stay loyal. There's a whole different breed of consumer, the millennial group. We have one that works for us. They want to tip the whole world upside down and shake it out. Growing full service is really, really hard. I applaud anybody who can pretty much stay flat year over year, meaning you gain as many as you lose. It's a dogfight. We're swapping customers. There's not a whole bunch of new heating oil customers coming into the industry. It takes a lot of incentives and work to get that to grow. Obviously, we have to keep doing that. We have to keep ensuring that we're trying the best that we can to preserve our full service customers, but it is getting increasingly hard. So what do? Well, you kind of have to think about new volume coming from new places. And it's going to come from a place that we have been conditioned to not like very much. and that is the on-demand market. We call it on-demand because will call conjures up images of, as I always joke, 425 FICO scores, barking dogs, and people not home with checks when you show up. Or demanding low prices, calling up on the phone, wanting credit terms, and there's no profit there. So the whole term will call in this industry has a very ugly negative connotation. But that's not the will call business anymore. And I know that most people know this, but not everybody. The on-demand market, not only is it growing and big by all accounts, and this has been vetted by state associations, by dealers, by any number of people in the industry, at least half the heating oil demand is coming on an on-demand will call basis this year. In some markets around Boston, it might be more like 60%. Fairfield County, Connecticut, which was pretty much the birthplace of COD, even bigger. But you got to look at about half this industry now. I know it sounds shocking. It's coming from will call on-demand customers. They're not as loyal to the full-service value proposition. They're more inclined to use the internet to order. They're buying oil the same way they buy a lot of other things, certainly other commodities in their mind. And this is a growing segment of the market. John, maybe you can touch a little bit. John, just so everybody knows here, Adrian says John and I founded Energy Edge, but it was John and Adrian who founded the Energy Engine business, which is what we're talking about today, e-commerce, online fuel sales. John and Adrian were doing this 15 years ago when it was almost virtually unheard of. So John knows a thing or two about the on-demand market. So maybe, John, you had a couple of thoughts to that, and I'll try to wrap up here.
Yeah, just a couple of things that come to mind, Mark. You know, when you think about, you know, this will call COD history that we kind of have in the industry, Adrian and I were kind of products of that same thinking back. It's actually a little bit more than 16 years ago when we were challenged with developing and launching an online business. And what we found out was, yeah, a lot of, you know, there were the customers, certainly those that would shop based upon price, that had always, you know, called up and rang the phone and said, hey, what's your price today? Okay, thank you, hung up and called the next company and compared their favorite half a dozen before making their purchase. So there, you know, there will always be the price shopper, but I can tell you today, unequivocally, that the on-demand shopper is a sophisticated consumer. They are just like Mark's neighbors, retired pediatricians. They are physicians. They're lawyers. They're accountants. They are investment bankers. They are people that are living in very affluent communities that are the type of customers that all of us would like to have as part of our business. They just prefer to buy differently. It's the same reason, kind of, if we take ourselves out of our industry for a second and we think about the retailing industry as a whole, it's the reasons why the largest retailers in the country, you know, the people like Target, like Kohl's, Lowe's, Home Depot, you know, even Nordstrom's on the higher end, are investing, making their greatest capital investments in their on-demand, or their online business, because that's where shoppers are going for convenience. Sure, they still go into the brick and mortar stores periodically, but boy, I'll tell you, if my wife wants something from Kohl's, even if it comes in an ad, rather than going to the store, the first things that she grabs is the iPad to be able to check out that shopping, and many times never gets to the store because she makes that purchase online. The same thing is true with our industry. As COD will call has now shifted to this on-demand dynamic, it's not about price, and we've heard this from customers over the years. It's about the convenience that you can provide to that buying experience when it's done properly, and when it is done properly, it's very gratifying. So it is a very sophisticated customer, and a customer that is worthwhile being a part of your business.
Thanks, John. I think we're just talking a lot about old ideas, and I don't mean old ideas that in a negative, bad way, like we're all, you know, I am old. I turned 53 on Monday, so I'm no spring chicken either. I just mean that old ideas in terms of how consumers are behaving. In our industry, consumers behaved very predictably for a very long time, and then they staged a sort of a revolt right around when the price ran up and then collapsed in 2007-8. Natural gas came in, and customers staged another revolt by migrating over, taking our volume from 10 billion down to about 4 billion in the process. And then now they're revolting in terms of how they're behaving and how they want to do business with us. They want to decide how to do business with us now. And we're not really used to that. But guess what? We're not the only ones. A lot of businesses are trying to adjust to this internet consumer. The fact that they don't want to buy in traditional methods. They don't even want to buy cars in traditional methods. I just read the other day that the whole concept of brand loyalty in cars is pretty much gone. People flip from one brand to the next all the time. So just old ideas about customers that we're talking about. So how we're going to make it cold? This is the sort of a crux of it for me. This is a math equation I've done a million times in my career in the energy space for dealers, and it's just simply a matter of looking at 600,000 gallons for January. That's roughly a 3-4 million gallon company. That's what they're going to do in January. Around 1,100 degree days, which is depending on, that's an average between the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic market this year. A little colder up this way, a little warmer down Johns Way in Pennsylvania. And for a 3 or 4 million gallon company, they're roughly around 545, 550 per degree day gallons. If you kept that number at 550, and that keeps your, it keeps your business whole, keeps your fleet whole, keeps your staff intact. And you do 750,000 gallons. And I use 750 because this is a real-world example of a company who embraced the on-demand space and is able to deliver. And this is quite modest. We have other customers who can, do multiples of this 150 extra, but they embraced the on-demand market after a bit of a struggle to get there in terms of their philosophy. And now they're delivering 750 in January. And that means that equates to 1,400 degree days. So they're able to make it colder simply by adding incremental volume to their business, even when it's warm, by embracing a new breed of customer in this industry. So the thing that you can control is you can control your growth if you embrace a part of the market that's growing. You maintain your gallons per degree day, and the impact is the same as the weather being 20% colder than it actually was this year. So this particular dealer, in his eyes, it was 20% colder, which meant since we're about 17% below the average, he's talking and behaving like he had a normal winter. In fact, a little bit colder than normal, because that's what happened in his world. This is the same person that quoted that, and this is not shameless self-promotion. This is just what dealers say, who are our customers, who finally understand what we're trying to do for them. We're not trying to destroy their full-service business. We're not trying to attack automatic delivery customers. We're just saying there's another consumer, and by the way, that represents about half the market, kind of hard to ignore half your market. He said, I can't believe that you're not selling this to everybody. Why wouldn't everybody want this given how warm it is? And hey, listen, I would love him to be right. It's just not the way it is, and we're an industry of people, we're the show me state, right? We're like in Missouri, you gotta show me first. And we're getting there. But this guy made it colder. He had a normal winter. He embraced a part of the market that even he was suspicious of. And it can happen to you too. It's easily being done. So we're talking about new gallons. We're talking about a change in thinking. We're talking about a new consumer. We're talking about on-demand, living side by side very comfortably with full service. We're not talking about the end of the world as we know it. We're just talking about our industry not being immune from the same consumer forces that are affecting every other industry out there. We're not going to avoid this consumer. They're going to make the same demands of us, and they already are. So if we're going to stop gambling on the weather and the commodity markets, and we're going to stop budgeting, I hope, then that means we have to take control. And by taking control, there's a handful of things that you can do. And I'm going to have my esteemed colleague rack up this presentation here, because this is the world he lives in every day with our dozens and dozens of engine clients who have taken a new path, taken control of their growth in their market, and are enjoying the benefits of that. So John, why don't you run through these?
All right, thanks, Mark. And I'll do just that in the last 10 minutes that we have here. Just a reminder for everyone that's on this call, as Mark normally does, he provokes, some questions or comments, and we encourage you to send those questions or comments over to Adrian. If you just use the chat field on your GoToMeeting panel to the right, just type in your questions. Adrian will have those and accumulate those. So after these next 5 points, we'll certainly spend as much time as we need answering those questions and maybe digging a little bit deeper for your understanding. So with that, Mark's talked a lot about gambling, and I'm here to say, hey, what are your options as far as stopping the gambling and really starting to take control over the customers that really prefer to buy business with you? And these are the 5 points that quite honestly you can take to the bank. As Mark points out, we have dozens and dozens of clients that are doing just that. I will say, even before I get into these 5, here's the number. Here's the most recent number that I've calculated. I looked at our network of clients through the end of January. Okay, and at the end of January, at that particular point, we were 3% colder than last year. So pretty darn warm, considering last year was a record warm winter, right? So 4 months into the winter season, only 3% colder than last year, our clients were 53% ahead in terms of their volume compared to last year. So degree days up 3%, volume up 53% for our same store clients year over year. Pretty striking statistic. And here's what these clients are doing for the most part. And not everybody does it quite the same way, but certainly we provide guidance to our clients in terms of how to do it. So let's walk through these one by one. The first is to cater to this new energy consumer who wants to be in control over their buying process. And most of them insist on doing it online. We talk about this on-demand consumer and being better than 50% of the volume that's done in the industry today. And it's absolutely true. Doing it online gives them convenience. It allows them to do it on their smartphone while they're at lunch or while they're walking across Manhattan, and they get a reminder that says, "Hey, it's been this many days since your last order. It's probably about time for your next delivery." Suggest that they check their tank gauge and click the link to place their next order. It's that kind of convenience and being able to communicate with that customer that online enables for you that makes it so convenient for these customers, and consequently different than the traditional COD or will call customer, can make these on-demand customers as loyal or just about as loyal for you as your full-service customers. So very important to know how to cater and interact with these customers. Number 2 is you got to be good at using this online channel. Okay, you need to use it first to inform people, and through that information you need to educate them. You then need to allow them to transact business with you, and that transaction today, we'll talk just a little bit more about this, is a two-way transaction. It used to be good enough, if you had a form up on your website that allowed people to fill in their name, address, and how many gallons they wanted, that was good enough. Today, not even close. Consumers expect that two-way interactivity that goes on in an Amazon-like type of experience, which they have come to expect from anyone that they're doing business online, and particularly somebody where they're buying their fuel from, where they're giving a credit card to you and trusting you with several $100s worth of a transaction. It's a high transaction, So you better look professional. You better make them comfortable. You better make them know that their transactions are in fact secure. And then you go on from that transaction to be able to provide them with the service experience that they've come to expect, knowing them as a customer, letting them be able to look at their order history, letting them know exactly when that order that they placed is going to be delivered. And then nurturing them and sharing information with them during the course of the year that allows them to be comfortable with you, views you as a professional, and consequently retains that customer for long periods of time. The third thing is really being able to enhance your margin with a new lower cost of order fulfillment. Matter of fact, the number in terms of savings is 10 to 12 cents, and depending upon the other things that online impacts in your business, it can actually be more of the savings than 12 cents a gallon. But let's just call it, for round numbers, 10 cents a gallon for a second. If you could go out and you could buy your fuel today for 10 cents a gallon less than your competitors, 365 days a year, would that give you a competitive advantage? It sure would, because it will give you the ability to do some things. Maybe you share part of that savings with your customers. Maybe you invest in some new whiz-bang things like maybe an online experience that would make you different than your customers and still more profitable than a COD or a will-call business. That is what is absolutely being done with on demand. And one of these days, Mark and I are going to put together the webinar that actually goes through exactly where that 10 to 12 cent order fulfillment savings comes from. It's a real number. We can actually, if you're interested, we can actually sit down with you, plug in your particular costs for all of the savings components, and you can see where your actual savings will come from. So now all of a sudden, this on-demand business is not a low-margin business. In terms of your net margin, it becomes very, very interesting. The next point is you need to be good at the new digital marketing techniques, because, just like any business, if you open the doors for a new online business, you need to be able to hang out your shingle. You need to be able to hang out the sign, let people know that you're in business, get them to come to your website. The good news is that doing that today is faster, is less expensive, it's cheaper, it's more timely, and it's much more precisely targeted to the type of customers that you're trying to attract than it ever has been. All these digital marketing techniques that we're talking about, whether it's search engine optimization, whether it's email capture, that you have to be doing through your online platform that you're using so that you can communicate back with your customers and also your prospects. You need to have email addresses of your prospects. If you have those, if you want to invest in some, Google AdWords or pay-per-click or Facebook type of advertising, very effective in today's market. E-blasts to your prospect group, people that have already raised their hand and said, hey, I might be interested in buying from you, and your customer group, and being able to send very specific messages to those groups, invaluable, absolutely invaluable at literally fractions of a penny per instance. You get them out quickly. You have an idea. There's a storm coming up the coast that's going to arrive here Sunday. You want to get a message out to your customers. It can be out to them yet this morning. It's that powerful and that effective. So digital marketing techniques. And then finally, new measurement capabilities. The old days when it used to be that I put a budget in place and have our targets and I'd be waiting for the end of the quarter when the accountants would add everything up and give me a few more weeks into the next month, and they'd finally come back and say, John, this is how you did this past quarter. Well, by that time, I'm well into the next quarter. I may have to make some mid-course adjustments, and then I have to wait another full quarter before I know how I did. Those days are long gone. In the online world, with the capabilities that we have today, we are in fact looking at our performance in near real time. One of the most important metrics that we work with our clients is how much traffic is coming to your website and what is the quality of that traffic. Because everything starts with the traffic if you are running an e-commerce business. You never get the traffic to your website, you're never going to sell a gallon. So it all starts with the traffic and the quality of that traffic. And actually, for any one of our clients, we could look today and see so far how many people have been to their website. And they have budgets, most of them that will set so that they can look and they can see on a rolling 30-day period, are they on track? Are they hitting their target for their traffic? And if they are hitting their target for their traffic, chances are that they're going to hit their gallons target, their dollars target, their margin target, and be able to predict that long before the accountants ever get their hands on the numbers. Very, very powerful stuff today, being able to measure what's going on. Even the marketing investments that you're making. You may set a budget of $40 a day maybe for pay-per-click. You'll be able to see at the end of the day, did you max out that budget? Did you not max out that budget? Where did the people come from that clicked on that ad? How many of them converted? You can see the effectiveness of that investment day after day after day. So it gives you that immediate adjustment. And you're not committing to that budget, like you may be to a series of billboards for a month or a quarter or maybe longer periods of time. You're making that commitment for that day. You want to change your budget tomorrow? You can change your budget tomorrow. So it's that type of flexibility also that allows you to be very good at maximizing the profit potential of your business. So those are the five items. I will say that, kind of the proof is in the numbers, and I mentioned that 53% volume increase through the end of January for our client base, even compared to last year, even though it's been so warm again this year. I invite you to challenge us now, in terms of some of the things that maybe you're thinking about for your business, or maybe some of the obstacles or the hurdles that you might have. If you're thinking about, okay, what you're saying makes sense, but I really don't know how to do this. So, feel free, ask us the questions, challenge us. We're here, and there's probably not a question that we haven't heard as we've engaged with our clients here now for the last dozen or so years. So with that, Mark, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to you for any closing comments.
No, I think that was great. Thank you, John. Adrian, so essence of time here, because I want to get people off the phone, get back to doing their work. It's about 9 degrees here on Mount Sunapee this morning, so hopefully busy. Are there any that came up, Adrian, during the course of the meeting?
Yes, we do have a couple. I'm not exactly sure who they're addressed to, so Mark, John, you guys can decide, okay? First question, if I start selling to the on-demand market, won't I have the same volume problem during the next warm winter?
Good question.
Great question. John, if you want to field it, I can field it any way you want to do it.
Without a doubt, when the weather's warm, people are using, less fuel, as, Mark took us through the examples. The point of expanding your market, Mark described the full service group as really a glass ceiling. I'm starting to think about it more like a concrete ceiling, because it's pretty darn tough to bust through unless you're willing to pay $500 to $800 per year and work with the attrition that goes along with trying to acquire new full service customers. It's much less expensive and much easier to go into this larger on-demand market and be able to attract new customers, first of all, at a much, much lower cost. But the other thing that our clients are seeing is that as they work with those groups of customers, as they get more experience with those customers year after year after year after year, their on-demand customer base gets more and more loyal. So you have the ability. That's how they're getting the 53% growth when degree days are only up 3%, because they continue to attract new customers out of this large pool, as well as getting the existing customers to buy more and more. The other thing, we haven't talked about it at all, but I'll just mention it, some of which goes into that growth, is with online and with the tools that you have available, you have the ability to really cross-sell other products and services to those same on-demand fuel customers, if you will. That also can contribute to that growth. One last comment I'll make is many of our comments during this presentation were really directed toward heating oil. We're also seeing the same dynamic, the same online dynamic take place in propane. I would say probably 8, 9, maybe 10 years behind heating oil, but we're now getting, matter of fact, just last month, I got a telephone call from, it's actually one of our existing clients, headquartered in New England, very large company. Certainly you would recognize them, but I wouldn't want to mention the name just for confidentiality reasons, but he called up and he said, John, he said, we need to take a look at the energy engine specifically for propane for this particular market, because we have competitors that have come in and are just putting in a lot of customer-owned tanks. And in the propane market, online makes a lot of sense where there's a high percentage of customer-owned tanks. So again, another ability for you to continue to grow your business even if you're faced with yet another warm winter. Mark, did you want to add anything to that?
The only thing I want to add is if you think about logically the statistic that our customers, despite the warm winter being flat to last year, have grown gallons by 53% year over year, there's all the proof that you need that their businesses online are growing. They're not selling more gallons necessarily to the same group of customers, which is the paradigm that exists with automatic. Many of our customers on-demand businesses, even sizable companies, has outgrown their full-service business. They're bigger than their full-service business was when they started. I know a great example in Massachusetts of a company, again, people would recognize, whose on-demand business, online business now, is nearly twice the size of their full-service business, which was pretty sizable to begin with, in probably 5 years. So it can grow fast. So the warm weather impacts are not as dramatic because you're drawing from a larger pool. Adrian, what else do you have?
How does selling fuel online cost less? It would seem with all the technology that we're just increasing our costs.
John, you want me to do it, or do you want to do that one?
I started the last one. You start this one.
All right. Well, first of all, you have to understand that the technology is not really expensive. If there's a belief out there that we're selling $100,000 e-commerce platforms, boy, we wish we were. It's a very affordable system for most companies. Can get into our system for well under $10,000. We always say that, and there's an ongoing cost to that, obviously, with licenses and hosting, but if you can do 150, 175 deliveries a year, you will pay for the engine. And then the cost of marketing really is the larger expense, and that can be calibrated. How much do you want to spend on marketing? I would only challenge you to understand that for most businesses, if you had 300 or 400 full-service gains last year, you can multiply that number times at least $500, and that's how much it cost you in real money to bring in those customers. And that is a massive investment in preservation. You probably didn't grow. You probably have roughly the same amount of customers you had the year before, but you just invested a fortune to preserve that customer base. And now we're talking about investment in growth. I would much rather invest in growth than preservation. And this is an infinitely cheaper date. It's a win-win. John, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, just kind of one other perspective. I mean, certainly, what you say is absolutely true in terms of, the technology to be able to do this. Something like the Energy Engine platform is very affordable. If that question came from a CFO that's on the call, from a financial analysis standpoint, this is probably the easiest cost justification investment you could ever make for your business. But that aside, the other thought that came to mind when I heard the question was, one of the points that I made was point number 3 on the slide that's still up on the screen about the lower cost of fulfillment. One of the things that sometimes prospective companies that are thinking about going online will point out is, hey, my credit card costs are going to increase because now, if I follow your guidance, you Energy Engine folks, 100% of my transactions now online are going to be via credit cards or debit cards. That's absolutely correct. So even with that, with the lower cost of fulfillment, factored into that is a higher cost for merchant processing fees. Okay, and it amounts to a couple of pennies per gallon or whatever it is. Again, we can go through this analysis with you individually if you're so inclined. So there is a higher cost there. There is a higher cost, a slightly higher cost for some data entry that needs to be done. We take all that into account. And still, when we look at those components that provide savings to you in the order fulfillment process, you're still looking at netting out a savings of 10 to 12 cents a gallon. So you are, in fact, looking at a part of your business that you can launch inexpensively, that you can save on every gallon that you sell, and also, given everything else that we talked about in how do you stop the gambling and start taking control, you can have more control over your business and, quite honestly, more fun managing that business than probably anything you've ever done in your career before. So, Mark?
Excellent. All right, I guess good. Adrian, we're done. Is that enough? Is that all the questions or no?
Yep, that seems to be it.
Okay, good. All right. Well, we ran 9 minutes over, which we don't like to do, but great questions. We appreciate everybody's time. Enjoy the weekend, and hopefully we can talk soon, and give us a shout if you need any clarification or questions answered. All right. Thanks, everybody.